and understand more about what purpose looks like for their sector and their stakeholders. So we've been working with a range of clients across the Big Four to legal firms and within real estate to really unpick these issues. So we've got purpose, social impact and sustainability. These are massive but also really interconnected topics and sometimes misunderstood topics. But the very heart of it, people want to be addressing these topics and they also want to be seen to be addressing these topics. So the challenge remains, how do we approach these areas authentically and credibly? How do we speak about them in a way that you're actually adding new insights to the discussion? Hopefully in today's webinar, we're going to discuss exactly that. So Matt, along with our panel, is going to explore what these topics are about in practice, but also how we can talk about them in a meaningful and insightful way. Over to you, Matt.
Thank you, Alice. We have Nick Misquitta. Nick is a Senior Business Development Manager at the law firm Bates Wells. Bates Wells are the first, possibly the only UK B Corp law firm. So absolutely thrilled to have Nick here and hear his views. We have Tamara Griffin. Tamara runs her own consultancy firm, working with purpose-led businesses and businesses that are looking at the transformation agenda. We've also got Paul Ioannou. Paul is an independent strategy consultant, but I think he's also spent quite a bit of time at EY working on a number of quite large purpose and community engagement projects. I'm sure we'll hear a little bit more about those later. We also have David Steed. David has worked in various client-facing roles in capital markets, professional services and the charity sector. He's worked across philanthropy, corporate responsibility and the impact of social investing. He's now at Maanch, hopefully I've pronounced that the correct way, which is an early stage tech B Corp, developing solutions to help businesses and organisations understand and manage their impact. And we've also got Tim Skipper. Tim is the Managing Director of Totum. Totum is a recruitment agency specialising in placing leadership roles and business services roles in professional services firms. So that is our panel. So Nick, maybe to kick this off, how should purpose be viewed and why should it sit at the heart of a business?
Well, for us, without sounding over the top, at Bates Wells, we don't separate purpose from strategy because it's that central to the business. And our purpose makes decision making easier because it takes certain options off the table. And then you kind of have a clear direction of travel. So things like who we act for, how much we pay people, which suppliers we use, it's all driven by our purpose of creating positive impact.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, purpose for me is the big why of any organisation. Why are we in business? And going even further than that, in terms of responsible capitalism, how do we add value to society as an organisation? And I think, as Nick said, that's purpose, but the critical parts are the strategies to deliver it and embed it throughout the organisation. And make sure it's consistently applied, and that's a much bigger task, as you say, than just creating a purpose statement.
And I guess there's not a huge amount. My perspective isn't very different to Nick and David's. So, like, authentic purpose is all about what you do, not kind of what you say. So that is changing that slogan into those kind of action plans and activities that align with your business. So, I mean, in my mind, purpose is all around kind of what products and services you sell, how you engage with your community, your environment, your customers and clients, all of those things, you have to bring that to life. And I think, in my mind, it's a lot easier for small organizations and startups to do that because they can set out with that purpose-led approach. But I think you can derive huge amounts of impact, really, from those large established organizations that have kind of historically been profit-led. When you can start to turn those super tankers, that's when you can start really making a big impact on society.
Yeah, I mean, I would absolutely, reflect everything that everyone said. I think, for me, purpose has to be at the heart of what you do as a business. I think a lot of businesses where I think, potentially they've gone wrong or they've been misguided is thinking it's just simply either a marketing initiative, so kind of creating this kind of statement of intent of what your brand or your business is about, but then not following through with any degree of congruence internally, or indeed they see it as simply a CSR and ESG initiative. And fundamentally it should sit within that ESG and CSR part, but it absolutely has to join every single aspect of the business together. It should guide what you do, how you do it, the decisions you make, your proposition, your culture, everything, every single aspect has to come back to your reason for being and why you exist. And ultimately what your competitive advantage is over other brands, other products, other services, other providers.
Tim, you've seen perhaps more professional services firms than most in the role that you're doing, and probably see quite at the forefront a lot of the initiatives that professional services firms. I mean, do you have any thoughts on that question? And perhaps I'd like to come on to the recruitment side a little bit later. But actually, do professional services firms generally live up to their purpose in perhaps the same way Bates Wells does?
I think it's been. We seem to be at a tipping point now certainly with the law firm world, where firms are starting to focus on purpose as an all-encompassing thing that takes in every aspect of ESG, D&I, etc. So I think it's very early on in that development phase. I would say it's great to have Nick on this call, because I recruited for Bates Wells probably 15 years ago, and even then I could see the essence of the purpose of Bates Wells shouting out at me more than any other firm that I'd recruited for before. And it's great to see that it still exists. So I think that firms like Bates Wells, yes, they might be smaller, but they are blazing a great trail in this world at the moment.
I think there's opportunities to stand out for any organisation that's truly purpose-led. I think David talked about the why. There's the why, the how, and the what. What law firms do, it's all quite the same. The why is really important. CSR, I think Tamara mentioned CSR. CSR has been around for 50 years, and that's about kind of minimizing the negative impact you have on the world as a business. B Corps and purpose-led businesses are about maximizing the positive impact. But there are risks. There are risks associated. You're putting yourself out there, and you're saying that this is what we stand for, but you're putting yourself out there to be swiped at and to be knocked back. So you need to make sure that everything you do, you act with integrity and ethics with everything you do.
It's quite interesting, I think, the experiences of the past 12 months, where the value of being human has just been so much more important than perhaps previously. How do you think, and Paul, I'm going to come to you, how do you think that is likely to accelerate the purpose agenda for businesses?
I think being human, I think, to be honest, the thing that's going to accelerate the purpose agenda is really the commercial imperative. Really, I think, and I mean, just in the last few months, I've been seeing, for example, I've had conversations with law firms where GCs and their clients are phoning them up saying, how are you going to help us deliver on our ESG agenda? I've seen central government is now evaluating social value as part of their procurements, and you can lose out on a piece of work on the basis of not having a coherent story around the social value you're delivering. We've all seen inequalities as a result of COVID, and the kind of the role that the corporate world has to play in this stuff. And obviously, probably the easiest one is the consumer attitudes have just changed. They're much more around sustainability in terms of sustainable products and services. So the opportunity really is for organizations to get ahead of that curve, to kind of ride that wave, and that's going to translate into revenue. It's going to translate into top line growth. And that's the thing that is going to drive this agenda. And I can see this getting much, much bigger over the next few years. And I've got lots of conversations around this and how organizations can really embed purpose in their business and make it real.
David, I saw you nodding away there furiously, and Tamara also. So David, maybe did you have anything you wanted to add, and then Tamara, come to you?
Just agreeing really that I think it although we've had these enormous social and economic shocks, I think, global growth is probably down 6 to 8% or more in the UK, more than that for sure. So there's big risks and big opportunities. And I think the opportunity is absolutely to come back as a better organisation. Now is the time to do it, with a positive challenge to everybody in that organisation to say, we can do this. And, the agenda has changed to a extent. It's now all about the stakeholders, not just about our shareholders. And there's a whole number of additional questions. But I think the opportunity is there. We talk about sustainable development goals as the sort of world's to-do list, but we tend to talk about them in terms of incredibly difficult problems, which they are. But we don't pay enough attention to the opportunity from that. For organisations that are innovative, that are looking to fill market gaps, that are looking to bring on fantastic talent from other countries, through greater diversity. And so, the examples go on. So I think, big risks and big opportunities. The big risk is that leaders aren't authentic, and they talk about it and then don't do it. And then they'll get found out by the investors and their customers and their employees.
Tamara, sorry, I cut you off. So please come on in.
Not at all, Matt. I just wanted to, I suppose, just build on Paul's point about obviously it being a source of, competitive advantage and commercial advantage, which is, I think there has definitely been an awakening in humankind around, why we exist, why are we here, and what role do we serve? And I think there's a role for businesses to play in kind of bridging the gap between humankind and what we can actually do good in the world ultimately. And I think there's been a growing movement, and clearly the sort of B Corp that we mentioned earlier and Nick's role in that at Bakewells I think is a really good response to that, in that businesses are starting to wake up and recognise their role in society and the impact they can have on not just social issues, but economic and environmental issues. And some of those actually do come with challenges and risks around the bottom line. They absolutely do. And that's why, for me, you have to balance the two in tandem. This isn't simply as I say, a sort of a vanity project of, saying this is what we're about and this is the good we're going to do in the world. It's actually doing it because you want to deliver some level of value in whatever space you're at. So I really do think there's a huge, strong movement in humankind just thinking more consciously about our role and the role we serve in business and indeed, in sort of the greater environment.
I mean, Tim, it must have a huge impact commercially on the recruitment side, and particularly as we have a younger generation coming into the workforce who are much more demanding of the employers that they're going to be working with. I mean, I just wonder if you've seen that translate yet into roles that you're finding, or is it, and how do you see that growing over the next 12, 24 months?
I think if we focus for a minute on the graduate intake, the millennials that are coming through, I read a report by McKinsey that said that I think it's 2/3 of millennial graduates take the social and environmental aspect into consideration when selecting where they want to work, and I'm sure it'll be driven bottom up in that regard. I also just wanted to flip to something that's very specific to the law firm world. And if you look at how law firms are ranked, it's all about profits per equity partner. It's about profit margin. It's about revenue per lawyer. And these lists of performance indicators are all financial. I think we need to have a fundamental shift to take into a whole range of other criteria that we can then form a judgment on how positive and purposeful a business is to work for.
It's not just a tick box in your appraisal forms, although there is a tick box in the appraisal form about being a B Corp and how you contributed and everything. But then it really does, it stands out. For us, we have to kind of separate the fact, well, not even separate, they're married together, the fact that we are a B Corp, but then we also see B Corps and other pull businesses as a market for us. And I think I said to you before that we act for 30 or 40 B Corps, and for us, that's exactly the kind of business we want to act for, because as a firm, 65% of what we do is charities and social enterprises and not-for-profits, but we want the rest of that work, as much of it as possible, to be for businesses. That businesses can do so much good, and the type of people that we're recruiting, from partner all the way down to myself, people have to be on board with that.
Two questions really. Have you seen any examples of thought leadership campaigns that have really stood out that you could perhaps point those that have joined this webinar to, if they were looking for inspiration? And then the second part of this question is have you seen any real gaps in thought leadership? What subjects would you like to see explored in thought leadership? Tamara, I'm going to kick off with you.
So it's interesting because I think there are so many different some really great case studies out there, not just of thought leadership papers and research papers, but also of organisations doing some really good work in this space. And the one that I guess springs to mind immediately for me is it's a bit Marmite as a brand, and it's Brewdog. You know, I think it's one of those kind of brands, obviously a sort of a craft beer brand, headed up by an incredibly strong marketeer in the co-founder. But what I really like about what they're doing in this space is they're using their brand and the power of their brand to do good. And clearly they're also making, you know, a good commercial gain from it as well. So they're doing good in the environment. So for those that aren't familiar with the work they're doing, they've got a campaign at the moment called Make Earth Great Again. And ultimately they are really kind of pushing the CO2 and waste agenda quite heavily. Their particular viewpoint is sort of anti this the UN movement of the climate change race to zero by 2050, and they're effectively saying, you know, tomorrow is today. You know, we need to act now. We can't wait around, and this isn't about setting out, you know, long-term agendas. We have to absolutely act for the sake of our own planet, and we have to do so today. So what I really like about what they're doing is they're using this kind of campaigning, kind of strategy to really force the issue and get people talking about it. So using the power of their brand to create the conversation and ultimately create action. So I think that's a great example for me, and one that's very powerful and very timely, I guess, today. And
they certainly get talked about quite a lot. David, any thoughts from you on here?
Well, I like thought leadership that can be applied practically rather than just, you know, intellectually, probably as part of a major movement over time. And so, I mean, think of a couple of examples that people may know less about. There's Pensions for Purpose, which has been going for a number of years, and it's really shifting the dial on the investment of pension funds towards sustainability. Of course, we're talking many, many hundreds of billions of dollars ultimately over the years that will be affected by that. Or another example I really like is the work, and a number of people have done it, around smart and sustainable cities. So again, if you look at something like Amsterdam, amazing studies, starting with sort of thought leadership, really stretching the ambition, but then a practical kind of framework to apply those lessons, on the ground. And if people want to have a look at that, have a look at donut economics, if you're not aware of it already, and how it's being applied to, smart and sustainable cities. I think that's really interesting. In terms of gaps, I'd like to see more on innovation, basically. More on innovation, so that we all get a bit more positive about addressing some of these challenges behind the SDGs in particular. So innovation around new ways to treat illness, innovation around green technology. I think there's a lot in the news today about plant-based solutions. So all these kinds of things, but let's bring them to the top of the agenda and see some more thought leadership around that, because I don't think we see enough.
I mean, I guess I would just give one example that I feel very positive about, and that's Unilever putting in £2 billion annually into its supply chain to try and get all of its suppliers paying the minimum wage. I think that's a pretty grand master plan on a global scale, but it's a pretty impressive ambition. I'm looking forward to seeing how that plan plays out.
I think there's a big gap in, rather than having these kind of ethereal conversations, is about what are the practical steps I can take to start to turn my super tanker, my profit-driven business. How can I start to make it more purpose-led? So there's obvious interventions, things like the right leadership, the right kind of culture. How do you start to how do you change your product set? How do you start deciding what the right measures are for your staff? Try to understand that in that level of detail, that someone can pick it up and start to go forward with that as a plan, to start to create their own plan for their own organization. Understanding what works elsewhere. What have organizations like Danone, who are now trying to turn into the first multinational global B Corp, what have they been doing that's worked? How have they managed to make those balances and trade-offs between revenue, research and development, who they work with?
So for me, I'd like to again move out of the professional services, and anyone with young kids, and I've got very young twins. You would have heard of Ella's Kitchen. So they're like the #1 kids food company in the UK. The guy who set them up worked at Nickelodeon, saw that they had, like, the kids had terrible diets, and there's a great brand story there. They're a B Corp actually, but they do so much on thought leadership in terms of childhood nutrition, which is really interesting. So check them out. Also on corporate governance, but very much thought leaders on how you can set your company up to achieve good things. In terms of the gaps, I just think maybe more about the commercial gains that can be had from doing good, because I think a lot of the time people think it's one at the expense of the other, but it's not. Like if you put profit and purpose at the same level, it's not saying we're gonna make less money because we're doing good. No, do good, make money.
So one of the gaps I would love to see more research around the B Corps as well. I think that could be something really interesting to see.
Well, the point about it not being business, I believe as being a critical business opportunity. I think the opposite. As I said, I think that there are opportunities for law firms to be even more successful by doing good. I don't. It's not one or the other, and I think that a lot of the time it can be led by charismatic people in firms and one person trying to push their agenda across. But I think that you need to take everyone on board, and it's the way that it's rolled out within an organisation. That's so important. You can't just say this is the direction we're going and like it or lump it. You have to take people along with you.
I think fundamentally in a lot of law firms, purpose equates to CSR or citizenship or social, whatever you want to call it, and often that just sits as a function within marketing. And it's so often when I will go and have conversations about translating purpose into reality and driving social impact as a law firm, you normally start with the person in the marketing team, when I should actually be going and speaking to board level people, because it really, if you get this right, it impacts HR, it impacts commercial kind of revenues, it impacts every aspect of the business, and everyone will benefit. So at that top level, board level. So I think that's part of the reason why law firms kind of struggle with this, getting it right up to that level of conversation and that level of agenda. So there is nothing stopping innovation and all of those ideas coming forward. It's right now, it's where the starting point is. It's very difficult on that position.
David, you put your hand up as well as Tamara as well. Why don't we go to Tamara first, as I cut you off last time?
Oh, gentlemanly, thank you, Matt. So I think the only thing that I wanted to, I suppose, just come in on was that I found it interesting, or find it interesting, that there are only 3 accountancy and law firms that have signed up for B Corp, one of which is obviously Bates Wells. And I just think that that's such an enormous opportunity for law and accountancy firms to really kind of differentiate themselves, stand out in their marketplace, and ultimately be the choice, the ethical choice So it's not a crowded marketplace at all by any means. In fact, you know, I think there's a huge opportunity for people to be early adopters and, you know, and make something of this for the greater good, as say, of their organisation and wider society.
But 2015, when we became B Corp, we really thought and hoped that by 2021 there would be loads and loads of law firms as B Corps. It's not about trying to steal this market and steal it and say we're the only one. It's not. We'll always be the first, but it's not about being the only one. We want all businesses to go this way.
To me, this is nothing straightforward in a law firm because they're complex places. We know that, but you know, it's about leadership. It's about keeping it reasonably simple. It doesn't have to be complex. It needs to be baked into the strategy. It needs to be communicated across all levels within the business, and there needs to be some way of measuring its effectiveness. And I totally agree with Nick that, you know, if you look at some of the things that fit into the whole sort of subject around purpose, if you do a number of them, it will make you more profitable. It will increase your top line. It will increase your customer loyalty. It will make you recruit the best people and retain the best people. It's all of that, but it needs leadership from the front.
Can I just add something just on that? The impact assessment, the kind of questionnaire that you start off, that all B Corps have to start off by filling in. That's something that anyone can do, whether you're planning to become a B Corp or not, and you can use it as a kind of barometer to see where you are and where you can improve. So even if you have no intention of actually going through the whole process and changing your articles and signing up to the Declaration of Interdependence and everything, what you can do is you can use the B impact assessment to just see what things you can do to make yourselves a better organisation for your people, for your community, and for everyone. But this is where one of the things that makes it toughest around the table, and obviously I'm not a partner, so I'm not around that partner table, but yeah, we have a reputation and risk group that reviews which clients we take on. All law firms do risk assessments on new clients and matters. If something is flagged on the risk assessment that means that it needs to be looked at by the RRG, then yeah, we've turned away lots of clients that weren't compatible with our purpose. Also ones that just were incompatible with existing clients. So really difficult to do that, especially in times now when things are tougher on all organisations, and us included, where you do need to bring in the work, but it can't be at the expense of compromising your principles.
CSR, to me, as a fairly sort of basic bystander, is committing an amount of money to activities which make a business feel good, whereas the purpose angle is when it's embedded in your culture, in your strategy, and in your very essence.
CSR, in my mind, is kind of money that is put aside to deliver some sort of social purpose or environmental purpose. I think traditionally it tends to be kind of volunteering, pro bono, maybe some fundraising. And I think the really exciting part around purpose is when you do start to bake it into your entire business model. So when you do start to say, okay, so how are we going to influence our supply chain to deliver against our agenda? How are we going to work with the right clients, and how are we going to maybe change the products and services that we deliver? So, I mean, if you speak to someone like Nick at Bates Wells, when a large proportion of their clients are charities, social enterprises, other B Corps, whereas if you look at other law firms, for example, they may do some work with those types of organisations, whereas a lot of law firms won't have any sort of client base in that area. A lot of professional services organisations won't do any work with those sorts of clients. So it's all about purpose and embedding purpose, about transforming your business model in its entirety in terms of your revenue streams, your activities, and so on. There's a big difference, but I just want to make the point before we go, which is there's a big gap between what great CSR looks like and a lot of value you could add by spending that money wisely and doing a really good job of that investment. And that's part of the journey towards becoming a more responsible business and becoming a completely purpose-led organization as well. So it's not like it's B Corp or nothing. There's a journey you can go on, and I think the people on the call here should kind of recognize that as well. It's not a be-all and end-all of becoming a B Corp.
Tamara.
So for me, I think CSR is almost a vehicle, a means in which you can deliver on your purpose. Purpose is the start. It's you know, it's the differentiator, it's your proposition, it's your position, it's your reason for existing. And CSR, as I say, is a manifestation of you delivering against that. So one needs the other in order to be able to function. But one can't. One could, you know, one potentially could function, you know, separate of the other, but wouldn't be quite as valuable. Yeah.
Nick, I'm going to put a slightly different final thought to you, just as you are the only B Corp on the call. Actually, that's not strictly true, actually, is it? I think, David, you're working for a B Corp as well. But actually, the final thought is actually the B Corp route isn't going to be the right route for every business. But what could a business do to move along that journey if it felt that B Corp wasn't the right approach?
And B Corp won't be the right approach for every business. But there is, you can, as we talked about here, CSR, and I worked at 2 other law firms before who did great CSR, like did a lot of good. So there's the model of doing good. There's also, you can also commit to a purpose into your business, into your articles, without becoming a B Corp. We've worked with the DCMS and a charity called Unlimited to create a site where it's called Purposely, and you can go in and you can actually embed for free. You can embed a purpose statement into your articles association. It doesn't mean you go all the way through to becoming a B Corp, but it's a start, and it actually kind of codifies that in your business. So if you are serious about doing this, and this is whether you're an established business or if you're an entrepreneur setting up a business and you think, well, I'm going to set it up as a company limited by shares, you know, you can actually embed purpose at that stage. You don't have to be a